So yeah, everything will be recorded. And with that, I will hand over to Adrian.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna. I'm going to click on share screen and hopefully a PowerPoint presentation will pop up. So let's see how we go. Okay, good. Right. What I want to do in the few minutes that I'm going to be speaking for is just to cover really 5 points. Firstly, just a little bit of historical background, but obviously not too much. Nobody wants to dwell in the past too much. Secondly, I want to speak about how the Labour Party works here in Hornsey and Wood Green, and then to expand that out a bit to look at how the Labour Party works in London, and then expand out a bit more to look at how the Labour Party works nationally, and then just to conclude with some big picture stuff about the party conference, about the leader, and about the manifesto. And then hopefully when we've covered those 5 points, you'll all be experts on how the Labour Party works. And when I finish giving this exposition, if you like, on branches and committees and whatever, Celia's going to come in and be much more exciting and talk about what we do locally, our campaigning work, and how people can get involved and really make a difference to the political life in our constituency, in the borough, and across our city. So hopefully, as we go, yeah. So as I said, the first slide and my first of 5 points was just to give a bit of a historical background. So in 1900, so 120 years ago, the unions and a few very small socialist organisations formed what was called the Labour Representation Committee to give Labour, working men, if you like, a voice in Parliament. And this was effectively a federation of the willing. Not all the unions signed up and not all the small socialist parties signed up. But I really just draw your attention to this, the idea that Labour was right from the outset has been a federal party, because this is still the case running through to 2020. So even though in 1906 the name was changed to the Labour Party, the basic organisation of the party remained the same. It was a federal party involving the unions and the what was still the socialist societies. You'll note, or you may not have noted, but I'll draw your attention to it a little bit later. There was no actual members of the party. You were a member of a union, or you were a member of a Social Democratic Federation or whatever. You weren't a member of the Labour Party. And as we move on, the unions, of course, were effectively funding the new party, but a court case in the later part of the first decade of the last century said that the unions couldn't use their money to fund the party, and so unions had to go to Parliament and get Parliament to change the law to ensure that the unions could continue to fund the party. But so the unions had to set up a political fund separate from their general funds, but there was an assumption that all union members would pay into this fund, and this fund would be used, amongst other things, to support the newly formed Labour Party. So it wasn't until 1917 that the party adopted a new constitution that for the first time, so it had almost been in operation for 20 years, that the idea of allowing individual members was adopted for the first time. So we had individual members could join the party, and the unions and socialist societies became affiliated organisations to the party. And I'll just finish this bit of historical background by leaping forward 100 years to say that with no cross-party agreement, the Conservatives in 2016 have changed the law to turn back that decision that was made in 1913, that said that the unions could fund the Labour Party, and there was an assumption that their members would do. The Conservatives have changed it, so there's an assumption that trade union members don't pay into the fund, and this will have a long-term implication on the funding of our party. So that's how we came into being. That's why the party has an important trade union element to it, which our sister parties in other European countries don't do. If you go to France, the Socialist Party, you go to Germany, the SPD, or wherever you go to in Europe, you'll find that they may have a relationship, but not an integral relationship like we do in Britain between the unions and the party. And just to finish off this bit, there are 12 unions affiliated to the Labour Party currently, and they're organised in an umbrella grouping called the Trade Union Liaison Organisation, CHULO, which has recently been rebranded as Labour Unions, and I am the CHULO officer in Hornsey and Wood Green. So the second point I wanted to just touch on then was about how the party works locally here in Hornsey and Wood Green. So our constituency Labour Party is made up of 4 elements, really. There are the ward branches, which are based on local government ward boundaries. There are local Labour Party members in self-organised identity groups, the Women's Forum and the Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Forum. There are affiliated socialist societies, which have members of the Labour Party resident in the constituency, and I've just given a few there, named a few there: Socialist Education Association, the Co-op Society, the Jewish Labour Movement, and affiliated union branches that have Labour Party members resident in the constituency. And in Hornsey and Wood Green, we've got 6 affiliated unions: communication workers, a union called Community, the GMB, Unison, Unite, and USDOR. So all 4 of these basic units of the party send delegates, elected delegates, to the General Committee, which is, if you've been to your local branch meeting, I'm sure you've heard the General Committee being discussed, reports come back from the General Committee. And so all 4 of these basic units of the party send delegates to the General Committee, which sets the direction of the party locally. As I said, the delegates from the affiliated unions elect their own officer. That's me, the Labour Unions or CHULO officer. And as well as the General Committee setting the direction for the party locally, there's also a joint operation with Tottenham CLP, because we've got the 2 CLPs in Haringey Borough, Hornsey and Wood Green and Tottenham. And so jointly with Tottenham CLP, there is what's called the Local Campaign Forum, which organises things like, as I said in the slide here, councillor selections. So the LCF will be very active in the coming period, selecting candidates to stand for the council elections in 2022. And also the LCF liaises with the Labour group Haringey Council. So there's a joint operation, if you like, with Tottenham CLP that's really to do with Haringey Council business. Wider than the Hornsey and Wood Green, of course, we're a constituency party within London, and there is a London regional organisation of the party. To start with, there's a regional office in Victoria where the paid Labour Party staff are based. They're led by the regional director, and currently is Amy Fodey, who is the lead paid official in London. And if you got elected to the GC, or you listen closely to report backs from the GC at branch level, you would often hear the chair or your delegate speak about, oh, I was in touch with region and they said this, or I've been in touch with region and they said that. And that is because the London regional office, the same as other regional offices around the country, have a number of functions that they have to carry out. I've listed 3 of them there, to ensure that there's good organisation in the CLPs, that rules are complied with, and generally they're responsible for ensuring that there's good administration of the party across the region. And of course, in London, there are 72 constituency Labour parties that the regional office is responsible for. The region also has to ensure that candidate selection procedures are properly applied, and they have to mobilise our members across the whichever constituency it is, be it the borough level, parliamentary level, or right across the region in terms of the mayoral election. The paid staff are responsible for organising that particular mobilisation. So the work of the paid staff, as you may anticipate, is overseen by elected members of the Labour Party in London. They're overseen by a regional executive committee elected from the London Labour Party Regional Conference. The conference meets annually, or at least it did before COVID came along. It meets annually, but it elects the regional executive every other conference. So the executive holds office for 2 years, even though the conference is held on an annual basis. And the conference is made up of delegates elected from the CLPs and the affiliated organisations, including obviously the unions, but the co-op, SEA, JLM, and so on. And the conference elects the committee, which is made up of CLP members, members from the affiliated organisations, and holders of elected public office. So the assembly members, the MPs, local councillors in London all get to elect their own person to sit on the regional executive committee. And I've just made a note on that final point that Hornsey and Wood Green is in electoral division 6, which is based on the assembly constituencies, so which is Enfield and Haringey and the North East. So it's a combination of constituencies, and our REC members are Amina Ibrahim and Claudia Webb MP. The fourth area that I said that I'd like to cover with you was how things work at national level. And there is a national office in Victoria. Well, of course, it's the same building as the London office. And all of this is overseen by the General Secretary, currently David Evans, been in the media a lot recently. And we should see that the General Secretary and his or her staff are really meant to be the neutral civil service type operation, administering the functions and upholding the rules of the party on a national basis. Also at national level, there's the Leader's Office, currently known as LOTO, a phrase you may hear in your branch meetings. LOTO standing for Leader of the Opposition. So, of course, when we're in government, it's the Tories who presumably have a LOTO. I don't know what they call it. But because we're in opposition, we have the LOTO, that's the Leader's Office. And the Leader's Office devised the strategy to be followed by the PLP, the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs in the Commons, and Labour's operation in the Lords. And all of this is overseen by an elected committee, the National Executive Committee, which has seats allocated to a variety of sections within our party. The leader and deputy leader have seats on the NEC as of right. Representatives of the CLPs, you may have very recently voted for the CLP representation on the NEC. There are 9 seats elected by PR. There's members from the affiliated organisations. The unions have 12 seats. There's seats for holders of elected public office, MPs, local councillors, and representatives from Scotland and Wales. So there's an all-encompassing, if you like, all-embracing national executive that oversees the whole operation, to which the General Secretary particularly is accountable to. And lastly, I think probably the big picture operation that many of you will be familiar with or want to know about, which is the party conference and how the manifesto is drawn up. How do we draw up our manifesto that we fight the election on, and the leader and the election of the leader. Well, the annual conference is, as it says here on the slide, is held to be the supreme sovereign body of the party, charged with not only determining policy, but devising and changing the rules of the party. And the delegates to the conference are either from the CLPs or from the affiliated organisations. And we didn't have a conference in this year, but next year presumably we will have. And at some point in the summer, we in Hornsey and Wood Green will elect a group of delegates to represent our party at the conference. And I think it's quite important to note that only delegates from either the CLPs or the affiliated organisations have votes. People who hold elected office, for example MPs, don't have a say in the way that conference takes its decisions on policy or rules. There is a smaller organisation called the National Policy Forum that's meant to have a more discursive role in policy development. And here, it's not just the CLPs and the affiliates, but also holders of elected public office have a right to participate and a right to vote as well. So MPs, local councillors, the front bench, all have an opportunity to have their say and have a vote in this more discursive role in policy development. But of course, MPF reports do go to the annual conference, and so the MPF reports need to be ratified by the conference before they can be part of the canon of party conference. The manifesto that we fight the general election on is devised at what's called a Clause 5 meeting, with Clause 5 from the rule book, this is, involving the leader and LOTO, representatives from the NEC, from the MPF, from the CLPs and CHULO, and the manifesto must be based on the party programme decided at conference. So the manifesto, you can't just be the leader and write what you think you'd like to write. The manifesto must be based on decisions taken at the party conference by people like you and me, for example. And I think I'm, Anna, just getting towards the end now. Just to say about the leader and the deputy leader are elected via a tripartite electoral college, which you probably all took part in was it last year? Or the early part of this year anyway. And the tripartite electoral college is members in the CLP, the PLP, and the affiliates. So, Anna, I'm going to stop sharing there. I think you said you'd take questions after Celia had spoken as well. So I'll hand it over back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you. That was a lot to cover in that space of time. Thank you so much for doing so. That was brilliant. And yeah, I think what I'm going to do is have Celia talk first, and then we'll have questions to both of you after that. So if I could welcome Celia, who's the Celia Dignan, who's the chair of Hornsey and Wood Green. And yes, Celia, I think I can see you. Zoom is so weird. But you just moved, but I think you're still there. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here. And thanks to Yvonne and Adrian as well for their involvement tonight. So first of all, welcome to all the new members who are here. It's great that you have joined the party. So I'm just going to add a little bit to what Adrian has said. First of all, just to introduce myself. So as Anna said, I'm Celia Dignan and I am the chair of Hornsey and Wood Green CLP. I'm elected by the members. I don't just appoint myself. I am elected every year at the annual general meeting of the Hornsey and Wood Green CLP, when the delegates who are elected by branches go to the AGM and they elect their officers for the coming year. So I've been the chair now for about 3.5 years, and we will be, our AGM this year was delayed because of COVID, but we have got an AGM coming up in February. So if any of you are keen to stand for as a GC delegate and or to take on positions on the executive committee, then you ought to think about putting yourself forward. I'm sure Anna will be able to give you further details of that, Anna and Yvonne. So, so what do I do as chair? Well, first of all, I chair the general committee, which is made up of all the delegates who come to that body from not only the ward branches, but also the affiliated trade unions. As Adrian said, we have 6 in our constituency, and also the socialist societies that Adrian mentioned. I myself am a delegate from one of those groups. I'm a delegate from the Socialist Education Association. I also chair the EC, whose job is to enact the policies that the General Committee has decided at its meetings, and to make decisions in between GC meetings. And I seem to do an awful lot of other things as well. I seem to be pretty busy all the time in my role as chair. So there's an awful lot of other things that are happening as well. So you have joined a very large CLP. We like to think we're the largest CLP in the country. There are almost 4,500 of us. And if we're not absolutely the largest, we're certainly in the top 2 or 3. And the figures sort of fluctuate from month to month. So we're always very keen to see how many they've got in Bristol, for example, because they're one of our biggest rivals, and also in Brighton. But at the moment, I think we are top of the league. And we're not just numerically large, we're actually a really, really active constituency Labour Party. we've got a very committed membership in Hornsey and Wood Green, and although meetings do seem to occupy probably a larger part of our time than they really ought to, it's not the only thing we do. We're a really positive and campaigning and outward facing group of members in our CLP. So what kind of things do we do? Well, obviously, one of the main things that any constituency Labour Party gets involved in is elections. It's our job to make sure that we return a Labour MP. So we're always very, very active at general election time. Every 4 years, we have to campaign to make sure that we retain a Labour council in Haringey. So we'll be selecting our candidates for those elections in the coming 12 months, and then we'll all be going out and campaigning very hard to make sure that we get a Labour council, because we know that some of the achievements that our Labour council have done have been absolutely magnificent and have made a real difference to people's lives. And I don't know if any of you read The Guardian, but if you don't actually take a hard copy of The Guardian, maybe go online today and Google the article by Councillor Amina Ibrahim, who Adrian mentioned earlier, because she's one of our regional executive committee reps as well. And Amina is the lead member for housing, and she's written an absolutely brilliant article about how the government will be refusing to cooperate with, how the council rather will be refusing to cooperate with the government on the deportation of homeless people. And that's the sort of difference that a Labour council makes. So campaigning in those elections is really important to us. But it's not just getting people elected. Obviously, it's the policies that Haringey Council then enacts. So through the local campaign forum, we are responsible, which I'm the vice chair of as CLP chair, we're responsible for drawing up a manifesto that those councillors stand on. Any of you who've been a member in the past will know that the last election manifesto pledged that we would build 1,000 council homes in the 4-year term of the Labour Council in Haringey, which is up in 2022. And I'm pleased to say we're well on track to deliver those 1,000 council homes, not homes at social rents, but homes at council rents. So these are new additional council homes that simply wouldn't be there if we had a Lib Dem or a Conservative council. So we've obviously got the London Assembly and mayoral elections coming up in May, and we haven't been able to campaign over the last few weeks because obviously we had a second lockdown, but we will be out delivering leaflets, and we will be phone banking, and I hope many of you will choose to get involved in that. Our Assembly member is Joanne McCartney. She's very committed, she's a very good Assembly member, and we want to make sure absolutely that she is re-elected, and we also of course want to ensure that we still have a Labour mayor in Sadiq Khan in London after those elections. One of the things that sometimes when you go around door knocking, people say to you is, oh, you political parties, we only ever see you at election time. And the great thing is, if you're in Hornsey and Wood Green CLP, you can say, I'm sorry, but that's absolutely not right, because we're here and we're campaigning all year round, every year, in between elections, through elections, and we're incredibly active in our local communities. So just to give you a few highlights of some recent things. We became very involved at a very early stage in our COVID mutual aid support groups, which our Labour councillors were instrumental in setting up. So we set up street-based groups with WhatsApp so that we could make sure that people who were self-isolating or otherwise needed help could reach out to people in their community and get the help that they needed. This, of course, on top of all the help that Haringey Council has been able to give to residents during this crisis. We've Labour members have since the first lockdown established 2 brand new food banks in Hornsey and Wood Green. There's a new food bank now in Bounds Green, which is run, the chair of Bounds Green branch Labour Party was instrumental in establishing. And we have a brand new food bank also in Hornsey ward, which the secretary of the Hornsey branch was instrumental in establishing, and she recently received an award from Haringey Council for that. Lots of our members are involved in those food banks. We also collect, many of us, on a weekly basis for the food bank in Tottenham, the Selby Centre Food Bank. We have a collection on my street every week, and we take the collection over on a Monday afternoon so that there's enough food for the rest of the week. Of course, none of us believe in food banks. We think that people shouldn't have to rely on food banks, but unfortunately at the moment they do. So as well as campaigning to ensure that everyone has a wage that can support them and their families, and that the benefits system supports those who for whatever reason cannot draw a wage, we make sure that we provide relief in the meantime until we get the Labour government that we need to get rid of the absolute poverty that this Tory government has brought about. We've also got some really forward-thinking and active campaign groups. We've got an environment campaign group which is incredibly active, and if you look on our website you'll see they produce regular newsletters. They're always out and about in the community doing fantastic work on the environment. We've also got a health and social care group which likewise is involved in monitoring what's happening in our NHS and social care system locally. It gets involved in lobbying, letter writing, getting the MP and councillors involved where they identify problems. And we had a very good meeting just 2 weeks ago where we had a number of speakers about what was happening in our health and care system. And we've also got a very vibrant universal credit campaign, which again was established by local Labour Party members, and we're campaigning to support those people who rely on universal credit, which, as we know, is an appalling benefit, which is contributing to pushing more and more people into poverty. So we've done a lot of campaigning work around universal credit. We're a very member-led organisation. None of these things happen because me or Anna or anyone else suddenly think, oh, why don't we do this? They happen because our members in branches come along to GC and say, we've talked about this in our branch and we think it's really important that we set up a campaign on this. We set up a food bank, whatever it is. So we're very member-led, we're very democratic. The EC of our constituency takes forward the decisions which are made by members who are the delegates to our general committee, which meets every month. We've got a whole raft of equality forums. Adrian mentioned some of them earlier, so that women can self-organise, our BAME members can self-organise, our LGBT plus members can self-organise. So they're very active doing all sorts of things. I hope that gives a flavour of just some of the things that are going on in Hornsey and Wood Green. As I said, it's very vibrant, it's very busy. In terms of what you can do as a member, obviously members join for all sorts of reasons, and sometimes people just want to pay their dues and not do very much at all, and that's fine. But obviously if you would like to get more involved, then you would be welcome, and we can put you in touch with the relevant people. There's all sorts of things you can do. Lots of people do actually enjoy going out and door knocking, believe it or not. I must say I love door knocking because it's an opportunity to just have a chat with people, find out what's going on, what concerns them, what are their thoughts about what's happening at the moment, and feeding that back into the work we do in the party. But it's not everyone's cup of tea, so no one's going to be forced to door knock if they don't want to do it. You might want to just deliver some leaflets down your street. You might want to get involved in fundraising. We've got a big fundraising campaign at the moment because we're trying to ensure that our premises in Middle Lane, the office at 28 Middle Lane, which is run by the Labour Party, can become fully accessible, because it isn't accessible for disabled people at the moment. So that's our big fundraising drive at the moment. If you've got fundraising skills, you'd be very welcome to help with that. if you've got DIY skills, you know, you could help in the office doing some painting and decorating. We always need things like that. And stuffing envelopes for campaign. You can stay in the warm and stuff some envelopes. It's really important work. And the point is that whatever you do, it all contributes to the work that we do collectively as a party. So I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour. I would commend the Hornsey and Wood Green website to you, and I would thank Yvonne, who spent hours and hours of time during lockdown revamping that website. So if you just Google Hornsey and Wood Green CLP, you'll find out all the things that I've mentioned today that are going on in the constituency, and you'll be signposted to ways that you can get involved in some of these activities. So I hope that's a useful overview, Anna, and I'm sure Adrian would, and I would be very happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Celia. And there's another opportunity to thank you, Celia, in general, for the hard work that you do as the chair of, like you said, such a large CLP and everything that goes with that. So thank you. Yeah, we're going to take a little break now for some questions. If people could either put their hands up, either visually is fine, or by using the hand up function on Zoom, if you know how to find that, that'd be great. And I will come round to you and take some questions. First, if I could come to Catherine Dean, if you could unmute yourself, Catherine. And
Thank
if
you
the
very
question
much.
is specifically to Celia or Adrian, then if you can make that clear, otherwise ask it in general, and whichever one feels it's better for them to answer will answer you.
There's one question for each, if that's all right.
Yeah, perfect. Go for it.
And it's just about detail, really. The first one is about, Adrian mentioned the change to the law about funding, and which would threaten future revenue for the party. I thought the change was that rather than opting out of contributing to the critical fund, trades union members would have to opt in. Is that wrong? That's the question for Adrian. Shall I ask the other question now? And for Celia, I think, Celia, you made a distinction between social rent and council rent. If that's right, can you tell me what the difference is, please? That's it.
Great, thank you. So Adrian, if you'd like to answer that, and then Celia.
Yeah, yes, it's quite simple. Going back to the 100 years ago, it was assumed that union members would pay into the fund, so they would and they would opt out should they choose not to. Now it's the assumption the Conservatives have made is that everybody is opted out, and you have to consciously choose to pay in. So it's a 100% turnaround from what it was 100 years ago. The reason why it's a longer term issue rather than an immediate issue is because those members who are currently members of a union who are covered by the old arrangement, so you are assumed to have opted in, you will continue to be opted in, and it's only new members who join the union who will be assumed have chosen not to opt in, and they are deemed to be. So it's not a short-term crisis, but in the long term, one can imagine if you just wanted to have a cheaper contribution rate, never mind any political axe you had to grind, in the very longer term, one can imagine that the union's political funds would decrease over time because there'd be fewer people paying into it. And so that's where we are.
Thank you very much.
Celia, if I can come to you.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Kathy, so thanks for that. Yeah, so the difference basically is that if you're in a council house and you're paying council rent, that it means that your home is actually owned by the council, and the council can set the rent that it believes to be a fair rent for that property. Social rent is often a term that's used to, or affordable rent is often a term that's used to describe a rent that is cheaper than the open private market. So you'd be paying less than you would say to a private landlord, but it would still often be considerably more than you would be paying for a council property. And the reason is that generally the level of rent is set at something generally around 80% of the average market rate, which obviously in an area where you've got high property values like London, that can itself be very, very high. So it may be cheaper than a private landlord would charge, but it's still considerably more than a council would charge.
Thank you. Can I ask a further question on that?
Catherine, we're going to actually move on because just in the interest of time, but we are going to have more time for questions at the end.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have time for your question then.
Thank you.
But if I could just come to Neil for Nat. Wait, sorry, is it Neil? Yes, Neil. If I just come to Neil and then we're going to move on, but there will be time for more questions at the end, I promise. So just Neil's question.
Cool. Sorry, I have two questions, but I'll try and be quick. The first one's like is a basic question. I'm also trying to Google this fancy new website, but I can't find it. And maybe it's me being a bit slow, but if you could share the link to the website, that'd be good. And then that's my basic question. And then the second one is about, I read the article in the Guardian today and I thought it was really good and really interesting. This is the one on the council not complying with government request to kind of deport homeless people, presumably kind of non-UK homeless people. And it reminds me a bit of the US in terms of kind of sanctuary cities, but it'd be good to hear about kind of what the risks are to the council for not complying. As in, is that illegal? Is there kind of some kind of ramification for the council? Yeah, just because I thought it was an interesting article and a good way to show the difference that a Labour-run council makes.
Sorry, you froze at the end there. Sorry, could you just repeat that last bit for me, Neil?
Oh, I was wondering then. Okay, yes. So my question was about the article in the Guardian talking about not complying on the government's request to deport homeless people or non-UK homeless people in Haringey. And I'm not sure who this question is for, but it'd be interesting to know what the risk is to the council, and if that means the council is like breaking the law, or if there's a kind of like legal ramifications of not complying with that.
Great, thank you. I'm really sorry. Yeah, you froze the first time. Sorry for making you repeat that.
Okay,
Celia,
there was like stunned silence. I was a bit worried.
Celia, do you want to answer that one?
I think that's really one for I'm certain that the council isn't planning to break the law, because that's not something that Labour councils choose to get involved in. But it's a case of working within the law, obviously, to ensure that housing officers in Haringey aren't reporting homeless people to the Home Office, where they then might face the threat of deportation, because in the new hostile environment that we have got, and in the post-Brexit world, then people's immigration status is going to be far less secure. And homelessness is one of the reasons now that people can be deported if they haven't got a UK passport. So I think what the council has agreed to do is to say that it will not cooperate by passing on the names of the people it's supporting through its homeless teams to the Home Office, where they might then bear the brunt of that hostile environment.
Thank you. Neil, was there another question or?
The question has been answered.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move briefly to Chris Clark now, who's our Vice Chair membership. And then after that, we're moving straight on to Catherine West. And then at the end, we're going to take more questions. So there'll be no more questions until that. So, Chris.
Hi. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Celia and Adrian and Yvonne for organising. Yeah, I'm going to be fairly brief. I think I'm the vice chair membership for the constituency, and I'm also a member of the Hornsey branch, and I have an officer position in Hornsey branch as well. I'd just like to say a few words about kind of my experience about joining the Labour Party, actually, and how bewildering it was when I first joined. I joined in 2015, and I'd never been a member of a political party, or I'd never been part of a structure of a union. And to be quite honest, I found it utterly bewildering. One of all the structures and stuff. One of the main things that's really confusing, and I'm sure that will resonate with most new members here, are the acronyms that are used, and I think it's just very, very, very confusing for people who are new members. I mean, I'm probably as I said, I've been a member for 5 years, and I'm probably guilty of using acronyms now that when I first joined I wished people wouldn't use. But I think the way to combat or get around the bewilderment is to actually be involved and go to meetings. And I mean, I think it takes a little bit of time to get to understand how the structures work and how meetings work, and but I think that if you go to meetings and sit in meetings, you know, by a process of osmosis, you'll get to understand sort of what's going on. One of the things I think that people can do is ask questions at meetings. And I know it's sometimes a little bit intimidating, but I think that in general we're a friendly bunch, and if people are not understanding what's going on, I think it's good to just ask questions. Stick your hand up and ask questions and say, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know what that acronym means," etc., etc. And hopefully you'll get a decent answer that maybe it'll be a little more enlightening for you. But I also at meetings, things can happen really, really quickly. So there's because people are, lots of people understand how the structures work and how meetings work and how the processes work. Things can happen very quickly, and all of a sudden you're asked to vote on something, and you're really confused, and you don't know what you're voting on, and things like that. And I think that you could try and ask questions at the meetings. Stick your hand up and ask the chair, or if you don't understand it in the process of a vote, you can stick your hand up after and try and get some information from the person who's chairing the meeting. I know a lot of chairs are very, very, very friendly. So I think that if you don't then still don't understand, I think that emailing the secretary, and I mean, I know secretaries are very busy, but if you email the secretary, you'll be getting lots and lots of emails from the Labour Party. But the person that emails you locally, you can reply to them and ask them questions, and ask them for clarification on anything, or they can put you in contact with the relevant officer that's involved at like membership for me, or the person that's involved in the campaigns, like that organise the door knocking or the leafleting or whatever. But I think asking questions is really important if you're a new member. As I said, it's just, you know, it can be very, you know, the local structures can be bewildering. The national structures, the national votes, you know, you don't know who you're voting for, and you're getting lots and lots and lots of information. So I think ask questions, and hopefully you'll get some answers that will be a little bit illuminating. I think on the structures, Yvonne might be able to tell me. We did do a document. I don't know whether it's on the website or not. That has a little sort of PowerPoint about the local structures, with I think the acronyms and the longer formats for the acronyms, which I think should be helpful for people to you know, try and attempt to understand how local party structures work. And I'm not sure on the website as well whether we've got, somebody mentioned how do they find out about the equality groups. I'm not sure whether they're on the website as well, but I mean, I think that you can also email your local secretary, and they'll give you the information about the local groups. Yeah, and that's it. If anybody's got any questions for me, but I think that yes, ask questions at branches if you're confused about what's going on.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. And yeah, there are lots of there's lots of that information on the website, including a jargon buster specifically to help us all with the acronym issues that we probably all faced when we first joined. But yeah, I would just echo that about asking, and don't be surprised that you're probably not the only one in the room wondering what on earth someone's talking about. If you think like that, you're probably one of many. So it's definitely worth coming along to our meetings. At the moment, they are all on Zoom, like the rest of the world, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll be back to normal meetings soon. But even on Zoom, we would love to see new faces at all our branch meetings. So do come along. Without further ado, we're going to take any questions for Chris after Catherine speaks. So if I could please welcome our wonderful MP, Catherine West, who has luckily joined us this evening. Hi, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's really lovely to be in the meeting. Thank you to Yvonne for reminding me to join. And it just wanted to give a few minutes on what's happening in Parliament, and then just be open for your questions as new members. But it's also nice to see some more familiar faces as well, because I can see that we've got some new members, but we've also got some members who have been present in our meetings before. Very briefly on Europe, you would have seen that we're getting rather close to the deadline, and I've sort of had butterflies in my stomach all day, and I'm sure many of you have as well. I understand that the Prime Minister is going to meet Ursula von der Leyen in abroad in Europe tomorrow or the next day. So I'm hoping that means that he's going to announce a deal. There was a rather sort of phony war style urgent question today in the Commons from, on our side, Rachel Reeves, and Michael Gove obviously is in Europe at the moment, is in the discussions on Europe at the moment, wasn't there. He normally takes those. So the fact that Penny Mordaunt was there, she's a little bit more honest, and you know, said how much how concerned she was. And obviously we also have COVID, and our constituency has the highest number of people who have signed the petition, or one of the highest constituencies signing the petition on questionable contracts. Many of you will be aware that with COVID, a lot of the public money has been funneled straight to private companies, which is rather distressing when we know how desperately in need the NHS is and our primary healthcare system. And the good law project is taking the government to court. So they'll be providing us with a briefing on where they've got up to in terms of questioning the giving out of these contracts. The National Audit Office has criticised the government and has said that there's billions of pounds which have been wasted on private companies at a time when, of course, we know that our hospitals are really struggling. Tomorrow I've also got a question in Justice Questions regarding the COVID outbreaks in prisons, which I'll be asking ministers about. And I'm also replying on behalf of the Labour Party about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict as part of my Shadow Europe role. So it's quite a busy week in Parliament. And obviously the week after that should be our last week in Parliament, but Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's the Leader of the House, has not yet announced whether the 17th of December the House is rising, because I think he's waiting to see whether the Europe questions keep going. And if they do, we may have to legislate over the Christmas period, because there is an awful lot of legislation which is still undone. Even now we have really obscure statutory instruments, which is a sort of secondary level of legislation coming to committee. I'm doing one of those tomorrow about the import of rare materials from conflict zones. This is normally an EU competence where in order to import lithium and elements that are used in mobile phones, companies have to comply with human rights legislation. And of course, because we may leave without a deal, or in any case, eventually we'll be less subject to EU regulation. There's a statutory instrument debate and vote tomorrow, which I'm leading on for the Shadow Foreign Office team. So there's all sorts of things happening where normally you would have a lot of debate and you'd have a lot of questions and there'd be lots of members speaking, and it's all being rushed through, which is how this whole Brexit debate has been in the last few years. And I'm sure for those of you who watch Parliament, you'd be aware that we have the immigration bill going through, the trade bill, the agriculture bill, the environment bill. There's a number which relate directly to Brexit, but which also, in a way, allow the Labour Party to set out its vision of wanting to be close to Europe, to European values, to European partners, but also which obviously promote democracy, the rule of law, good trade relations, good industrial relations, and fair trade. So we do actually have some opportunities in the coming months to lay out a Labour vision for the future. And I hope members will become involved in the discussions which will happen next year, because obviously we will have discussions in the National Policy Forum debate. And if you stick to your ward chair and your CLP chair, you will eventually get information about how to become involved in various discussions, depending on which particular policy area you're interested in, whether it's health or foreign affairs or Home Office policy. And that's the way that, you know, it's really helpful to have members getting involved in terms of shaping the manifesto for the 2023-24 election period, which feels like a long way off, but actually it will creep up on us quite quickly with the London elections next year and then Haringey Council elections the year after. Once they're behind us, then we'll be looking straight down into the tunnel of another general election. We do also have to get over the hump of the Parliamentary Constituencies Bill, where Hornsey and Wood Green may well lose a ward because we're a very large constituency. We have about 10,000 more electors than other constituencies. So I hope Fortis Green doesn't drop off into another constituency, but we don't know any of that yet. But it will be probably a slightly smaller boundary by the time we actually get round to the election. But once again, thanks so much for the invitation, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions. It's always difficult to know what people are interested when I've not met them before, but looking forward to having questions and hearing about what's important to you as new members.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Your time as always. It's really brilliant to have such a hardworking member of Parliament who always makes an effort to turn up to these kinds of things as well. So thank you again. If people have questions specifically for Catherine West, I think I'm going to take those first, and then I'll open it up to any other general questions. So again, if you want to use the hands up function on Zoom, that's great. And if that's complicated, then if you put your hand up visually on the screen, that's good too. And if there are no specific questions, none that I can see, we'll come to a question that has already been asked in the chat box. We had a question, Celia, I don't know if you want to answer this question that was from Patrick about having training in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Patrick, do you want to clarify your question or add anything to it? Unsure.
But perhaps I could. I've been having a conversation with Patrick. Oh,
right. Yeah.
Yes, as a new member, Patrick wanted to get some advice, or specifically asking if there's any specific training that's available, so that with the minefield of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and also some of the recent edicts from the General Secretary, so that new members might be particularly nervous about speaking during a meeting and want to avoid conflict or upset, but not know what is and what isn't permissible to say or discuss. I wasn't able to give any advice, so I think perhaps that's probably a question for Celia, but I'm happy for anyone to help members avoid getting themselves into trouble.
I'm happy to answer that, and if that would be helpful. Yes, so actually at our last general committee meeting, there was a motion was passed. It was an amalgamation of motions brought from two different branches, and then it was amended with the permission of the movers of the motion, which discussed the outcome of the EHRC report, which I'm sure you've all been reading about and are familiar with, and the importance of everyone in the Labour Party fully taking on board what was written in that report and then moving forward on its recommendations. So we intend to do that and that motion was passed almost unanimously, I'm pleased to say. We obviously intend to do that in Hornsey and Wood Green, and part of the amendment to that motion did say that the movers felt it was important that we organise some local training. So I understand the National Party is meant to be rolling out some training, but they have been telling us this for several years, and it doesn't seem to have happened yet. So hopefully they will get that off that ground eventually. But the motion actually said we shouldn't wait, and that we should organise some local training on anti-Semitism. So the EC will, which is the executive committee of the party, will be moving forward on that, and we were instructed to consult with representatives of local Jewish members and organisations to ensure that training package was put together. So we will do that. On Islamophobia, I know that there are motions going to the that have been passed at the most recent ward meetings at the beginning of December, and will be going to the GC on the 16th of December. And if those are passed, and I fully expect that they will be, then again, I think people are calling for some proper training for people in the party about actually what Islamophobia is, and how we need to tackle it, but how we also need to question some of our own words and deeds sometimes in the Labour Party, because obviously we're not immune to the prejudices that are outside in wider society. So yes, I think the answer to that is yes on both of those.
Thank you very much, Celia. Thank you. And can I now take a question from Anne Fearon?
Yes, thank you. Somebody, I've forgotten who actually, sent me the 800-page document all about the governance and legal unit. And I've got no idea who that is and how they fit in. And are they connected with the disputes panel, or what are they? Who are they? What do they do?
Okay, well, I can partly answer that in any event. The government and governance and legal unit are a section within the General Secretary's office. So in other words, they are paid employees of the party who report to the General Secretary, who are responsible for exactly what it says on the name, for the governance of the party, to ensure that the party is governed in accordance with the rules, and the legal unit to ensure that everything is done in keeping with the law. There is a very arguably a strict regime about spending on political parties during election time, about who can give money to parties, whether you need to be resident in the country to make a donation, and so on. And so the government and legal unit not just have an internal function, but if you like, they have an external function as well, to ensure that the party doesn't transgress the electoral rules as well as its own rules internally. So I think that's about it.
So are they mainly lawyers?
Not necessarily. The party has standing counsel, so the paid employees of the party, if they would felt that they need to have legal advice, have standing counsel, and they can take legal advice straight away from who, I forget the name of our counsel at the moment, but they are standing counsel, so they don't have to be commissioned. We just have the ability to consult them immediately.
So you say they come under the General Secretary?
Well, all paid employees of the party are responsible to the General Secretary.
Oh, right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adrian, for that. Are there any more questions? I don't see any hands up if there are. Otherwise, I will come back. Oh, Gordon. I'll take Gordon and then I'll come back to Kathy, who I think had another question from before. Gordon.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to know from Catherine West some of the issues, the arguments around how the Labour Party will vote when the deal, if there is a deal, comes before Parliament in due course. It seems to be a rather tricky decision as to which way to go, and certainly there seem to be quite a few different views. I'd be very interested to hear Catherine's analysis of that.
Thank you, Gordon. At the moment, obviously, in our hearts, many people would like to vote against any deal if it does come forward, because obviously there's still a strong chance that there won't be a deal, especially if you listen to some of the backbench Tories in the House of Commons tonight talking about sovereignty. But in actual fact, we all know a no-deal arrangement would be very disastrous, particularly given that our economy is so weakened due to COVID and challenged due to the climate change challenge. So this would be a bit like a triple whammy. But let's say that they come forward with a deal. We're aware that it will be a thin deal, so not nearly as good as what we've already got with the EU as members of the European Union. So then the choice really is, do we vote in favour of the deal? Because I suppose it's a way of saying it's better to have a deal than no deal. Or do we abstain on the deal because we didn't really like Brexit to begin with, and it's not a very good deal, and there will be real challenges around sticking to some of the benchmarks of workers' rights, environmental protections, consumer rights. There'll be problems for many of us with, travel, with living in European countries, with even going abroad for a holiday. If you take your pet on holiday, the pet passport issue, there's a number of challenges there. So do we vote against? Or do we abstain and allow it to pass? So as you're all aware, we're short of 80 members, so we can't win a vote anyway. It's quite symbolic, but I guess this is really a judgment call for the leader. And I know that Rachel Reeves, who's leading on the Brexit negotiation, has been consulting, and she personally phoned me because, we have a very strong number of people who want to remain in the EU and who were very anti-Brexit to begin with, in Hornsey and Wood Green. And she's kind of consulting with all sorts of different MPs who lost their seats, which is quite interesting because some MPs who lost their seats in the last general election feel that they didn't lose their seat for nothing and they don't want to vote for a Brexit deal, and others feel that somehow they needed to learn a lesson and that it was better to vote for a Brexit deal because in the end that was sort of in tune with the referendum vote of 2016. So it is a very complex, and I believe that the newspapers, and I think the newspapers have done quite well to cover the conundrum that Labour is in. But, I guess tonight really is about asking you all what you think Labour should do. Do you think it's very clear that a particular path is very clear? Or do you feel that it's quite difficult to say which way? So I'd be very interested in views, if we have time, Chair, very briefly, just to hear back what members think.
Well, if I could,
I'm happy if Gordon, did you want to respond on that? And if there's anyone else that wants to respond on that very briefly?
yes, just to say that the problem seems to be between abstaining and going with the deal. Is how do you have the strongest position to challenge the Conservative government in future? How can the party escape being tarred with the brush of this, what might be at the best a very thin deal? So that, and for my part, I would abstain, but it's not my choice.
Thank you, Gordon. Is there anyone else that would like to share their opinion, particularly new members or any other members? Yes, Richard?
I would just like to support Gordon in that view, that my inclination would be to abstain so that the Labour Party is not tainted with this very right-wing project. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know if there's any further views on that.
I mean, I just unmuted to agree with the other two. I think it's very difficult if you vote for the deal, even though obviously a deal is better than no deal. But it's very easy then to just for the Tories and the Tory press to turn around and say you voted for it. So I think abstention seems like the right way to me.
It's always funny when lots of people feel very strongly for abstentions. I understand it. I just find it an interesting political element. Thank you. I don't know if there's anyone else or anyone with a differing view that wanted to share. No, well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly go back and say I had a meeting last night.
I was going to say you've got strong consensus from people who have spoken.
It's not empirical, and it's only 3 of my 5,000 member strong constituency Labour Party. But of those, 3 within a branch, and it is a big branch, Fortis Green, feel abstention is the safest for the future, because we all know it's going to go a bit wobbly in the next couple of years because of that. There's a 4th, Patrick.
It's all about how you present the statistics. It was also 100% of the members who spoke.
That's very true. That's very true.
I'm going to move on. Dan Lally, I don't know if you have a question. Dan? Don't seem to be able to hear you. You are unmuted, but you aren't audible, or at least not to me.
Hello, hi.
Hi, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. So just in terms of abstaining from the vote regards to a deal, I think considering that Catherine is going to, use this as a sort of sounding board as to how we feel, I think I'm going to step in real quick. So if we look back to Theresa May's deal and we compare what we have now, I think there's a real sort of, you can lose out a lot. And it's better the devil that you know. And if we look back to the deal that Theresa May put on the table and compare it to the sort of, I'm going to go as far as to call it a monstrosity of a deal that we have now, we would almost really do anything to have a deal that had the sort of open-ended nature where we could then slowly build out the legislation outwards. Whereas what we have now, it seems we'd be scrambling for anything at all. And if anything, I feel abstaining will only lead to the chance of a no deal coming about. And this deal is a lot better than what trading under the World Trade Organization rules would be. So I would say that although it is not ideal, I would urge our MPs to go ahead and vote for the deal.
Thank you, and thank you for offering a differing opinion. I always find that helpful and valuable in meetings. So thank you. I don't know if there are any other questions. Kathy, are you still here? I can't see you, so I don't think you are. Are there any other last questions? Otherwise, I think we're actually going to wrap up and say a big thank you then to everyone who attended. Thank you so much, and thank you. It was lovely to see all the new members. Thank you for coming. I hope you do continue to come to our branch meetings and get involved in whichever way you can. Celia touched on lots of those ways before. We would love to see you there. And thank you so much to Yvonne for organising this and all the hard work she does and putting these kinds of things together all the time. Edwin as well. A thank you to Celia, to Adrian and to Chris for speaking, and of course to our wonderful Member of Parliament, Catherine West MP. So thank you to all of you. It was lovely to see you, and I hope to see all of your faces at many more meetings in the future. And enjoy this weird December that we're having. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.